Good evening. Welcome to the Pleasanton Unified School Board special meeting on Thursday, November 20th at 5:04 p.m. I'll call this meeting to order. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mary Jo, since you're smiling at me, why don't you lead us? All right, thank you. We'll start with introductions. Namarta?
Good evening, Namarta Grewal, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources.
Good evening, Ahmed Shigo Islami of Business Services.
Good evening, Ed Dialazo, Deputy Superintendent, Educational Services.
Good evening, Mary Jo Carrion, Trustee Area 1.
Charlie Jones, Trustee for Area 2.
Good evening.
Sorry.
Lori Walker, Trustee for Area 2.
All right, Justin Brown, Trustee for Area 5. I always have to think about this and serving as President this year. Vice President McCaughey is running a few minutes late. Traffic from Fremont on the highway. So.
Good evening, Maurice.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Good evening, Maurice Geisel, Superintendent. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending.
And Lenita Villaseñor, Executive Assistant to Dr. Geisels and the Board of Trustees.
All right. So just as a matter of introduction, before I hand it over to staff, tonight is a special board meeting. So the only item on tonight's agenda is around the continued discussion and action around the budget reduction. And so tonight we do intend to be taking action. And so we will be doing a vote on that. So it's a continuation of the last meeting, which is taking action on the recommendations from the last meeting, plus some specific discussion around other action items that staff took. As it's a special meeting, we will be taking public comment tonight, but only on items related to the budget. If you'd like to speak on any item not related to the budget, I would encourage you to come to our next regularly scheduled board meeting, and there'll be a time for non-budget related topics. So with that, am I turning it off to Maurice or to you, Ahmad?
To me, President Brown. Thank you. Maud's working the slideshow. Thank you. Mr. Shikul Islami.
This first one, item number 2, there's no slides with it. The slides are for item number 3. This is just taking the action on the work that was done at the last board meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah. You want to go
ahead? Thank you. So President Brown, that I stand corrected. It would be the action item based on the discussion last week.
Okay. Obviously, we need to open public comment on this, but is there any further staff discussion? No? Okay.
No.
Any board questions before I turn it open for public comment? So this would be public comment on all the items listed in the PDF. So these are items that we weighted as a 1 at the last board meeting, which includes, actually I can summarize it, it's a short enough list, reclassifying the CTE director to assistant director, reducing 0.2 FTE tech services director, reducing 4 FTE custodian 1 at elementary schools, 1.5 FTE custodian 1 at middle schools, increasing the staffing allocation at middle schools, and staffing allocations at high schools, and then freezing stipends for certificated and classified educational degrees. So that's the sum total of those for discussion. If you're here to talk about the risks discussion, that's actually as part of the next agenda item, and I'd encourage you to wait until I open public comment on that. So with that, okay. Okay, so at this time I have 4 cards, one from Christina Nystrom, one from Patty Hanafi, one from Alicia Hengst, and one from Stephen Dutra. We'll go in that order. If you are specifically talking about the risk piece, then I'd wait for the next one. Otherwise, I'm going to leave you to your discretion. So, Christina?
Good evening. So tonight I just want to talk briefly about one thing that I know. The one thing that I know here in Pleasanton is that all does not mean all. I've spoken before about the data from the California dashboard for our students for 2024. The data for 2025 came out last Thursday. I sent all of you a couple messages about it. The data is so disappointing and really should be informing the decisions that you make about how we are spending money. I was shocked to see that now Pleasanton educates African American students worse than the state of California for both ELA and for math. For math specifically, our scores went down 7 points compared to 2024. So obviously I was very disappointed to see that. But I decided to look a little bit further because maybe this is an anomaly. So I looked at our Hispanic students. What I found is that our Hispanic students did better in 2024 than they did in 2025 for ELA and math. Now, both for African American students and for Hispanic students, the state of California did better. San Ramon continues to perform better than we do, leaps and bounds. And again, San Ramon is a like district. They have very similar demographic proportions than we do. This is probably obvious, but or maybe not obvious. Just to compare a little bit, our Asian students continue to crush it. We do better educating Asian students than California and San Ramon. Same with our white students. Unfortunately, our SPED students, I can't believe it. California and San Ramon SPED students are doing better year over year, but PUSD students are doing worse year over year. Our white students are still doing, they're continuing to achieve, and again, higher than San Ramon. And the state of California, our EL students are slightly better for ELA, but worse for math. California and San Ramon, again, continue to achieve. So the reason this is salient, again, to your discussion today, is that I know that here all does not mean all. And getting the same thing is not necessarily equal and fair. And so I hope that when you're making the decisions about what to keep and what to cut, you really keep in mind that there are groups of students whose parents do not rely on the school district to educate their kids. That is fact. There are parents that are relying on tutoring and Kumon, etc. There are students that do rely on PUSD. Those are students that are not generally represented here in this forum. The last thing I'll say is this. If you don't cut things that people really, really care about, you will not be successful getting a parcel tax passed. These are really crummy situations and decisions that you have to make, but if it's not painful for those of us sitting in the audience, if we happen to find money somewhere so we don't have to cut programs we love, it's going to be very hard to convince the community to fund the schools better, which is what we should be doing. So, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Christina. Next, I have Patty, followed by Alicia.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank you all. I truly want to thank you. I know how agonizing these budget decisions have been, and I want to acknowledge the time, energy, and heart you've poured into protecting what matters most, which is our students. Your commitment shows preserving our elementary specialists, reducing cuts to intervention specialists. These choices tell our community that even in a fiscal storm, you are determined to safeguard the core of high-quality education, and we are grateful. But gratitude won't fix what's ahead. Even with careful cuts, we all know that the underlying financial problem remains, and it will continue to resurface unless we make changes. I'm especially concerned about the potential reduction or loss of our elementary reading intervention support specialists and a reduction on the time of our intervention specialists. These educators are the safety net for children who need foundational literacy support, and when that net disappears, students don't magically catch up. That gap widens and follows them for years. Pleasanton cannot continue living from deficit to deficit, forced into reactive cuts that undermine the programs we know work. It's time to shift from crisis management to long-term stability. That's why I'm here tonight to ask the board to begin developing a PUSD STEAM parcel tax. This would be a stable, locally controlled funding source, one that cannot be taken away by the state, dedicated specifically to strengthening science, technology, engineering, arts, and math programs, protecting specialist positions, including reading intervention, protecting music, science, and engineering programs, and offering competitive compensation so we retain talented staff who make Pleasanton schools exceptional. A STEAM parcel tax isn't about plugging holes. It's about declaring who we are as a community. Pleasanton has always stood for opportunity, innovation, and excellence. Our students deserve more than the minimum required to get by. They deserve the foundation to thrive. Other Bay Area districts have used local parcel tax to transform their schools. These measures work. They stabilize budgets, shield classrooms from federal and state volatility, and create the programs families move here for. We have that same opportunity if we choose it. So tonight I'm asking the board to take the first decisive step. Now let's be clear, parcel taxes are not popular in Pleasanton, which is why I am proposing a targeted parcel tax. And in deference to, where'd she go? In deference to what you said, I have to agree with Trustee Jones. If you cut the programs, we cannot get a parcel tax passed to bring them back. We need to get a parcel tax to save existing programs. And it is clear that these programs are in trouble if we don't pass a parcel tax. I am here offering my support. I will help in any way I can because I believe Pleasanton students deserve the best. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next we have Alicia, followed by Stephen.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alicia Hengst. I am a library media assistant at Vintage Hills. I spoke at last week's meeting and find it necessary to speak again. The board has overall moved the library media assistants from a level 2 to level 3. Thank you for that shift. I know we are still on the list, so we are still vulnerable to budget reductions. I'm concerned mostly that there are still some board members that see the elementary LMA's reduction in particular as ineffectual. All of our PUSD libraries are important. Every grade level, every school, every student. As the library media assistant at the elementary level, we see our whole student population within 2 weeks. SDC students and TK through 5th grade. For those class visits, we have a lesson plan, book, and presentation that we share with our students. This is just a fraction of what we do. Our school libraries are a safe haven. My library is open 3 days a week during lunch recess. It's a great energy, one of my favorite times of the week. The importance of equity for our students should still be one of our top priorities. There are more students than you realize that don't have access to our public library. Their only time in a library is at school. The proposed cuts for our LMAs will deeply affect our students. 20 hours a week. That's over a 30% reduction in the time for our libraries. That would likely mean class visitations going from biweekly to monthly. Lunch recess hours would disappear. A major reduction in access for our students to their library resources. The safe haven might not be there when needed. My passion is for the institution of libraries. Information, curiosity, creativity, imagination, literally A to Z. That is what our libraries do for our students. Don't make our libraries dusty old bookshelves. Please help to keep them vibrant learning centers for our students. We don't want you to regret your decision down the road. Libraries are not obsolete. Let's continue to think of the future of our children, our libraries, and their resources. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Alicia. Next up, I've got Stephen Dutra.
Hello, I'm Steve Dutra. I was here a few weeks ago, and I implored the board to go back to staff and ask them to get more creative. I don't think my request was heard, and no request was made to staff. And so I'm here again. Looking at what is on the line for the next round of cuts, I'm disappointed. And for the sake of time, I'll point out one line item. Freezing the advanced degree stipends for teachers and staff. I think this really sends the wrong message for PUSD. We as parents want the best trained educators in our schools. Generally, more training and education leads to better educators. This board has already made the mistake of reducing professional development for teachers, and this additional cut would intensify the impact these changes will have on our children. I also foresee this coming back to bite us in terms of teacher recruitment, retention, and negotiation with teachers when their contracts come back up. At Valley View alone, there are many new hires in their first years of teaching. They need the professional development to hone their craft and support them in the difficult task of teaching our children. Removing and reducing these benefits for teachers specifically makes PUSD less desirable to work for than bordering districts. So to reiterate and be clear, is the board moving towards recommending that PUSD not have teachers with advanced degrees and hiring teachers with minimal experience, but then supporting them with less professional development? How is that best for our students? We are obviously at the point where there are no easy budget cuts to be made, but cuts still have to be made. In my opinion, the students of the district have already paid enough through the cuts that have already been approved in the last few meetings. What I would like to see is a comprehensive review of the district office and how the remaining budgetary cuts that need to be had can be extracted there. This means a deep dive into the efficiency of the district office and a hard look at district operations and personnel, especially management. Lastly, back to the lack of creativity in the list of options to cut. There was a recent budget mishap, an accounting miss, I believe to the tune of about $3.5 million. I know errors happen. I've seen them in the private and public sector. I'm not here to call anybody out or judge anyone, but just to point out that staff is fallible, and very recently. The board is making a mistake if they're following the list produced by staff and following that original list solely. I implore the board to reconsider these last few cuts and what their long-term impacts will be for our schools, teachers, staff, and most importantly, children. Please push staff to come up with more options, push them to get more creative, talk to teachers and staff, actually talk to them, on the long-term impacts these cuts will have. There's still time. Cuts don't have to be made today to make the right decisions for our students. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Is there any other public comment tonight on item 2, which is the budget reduction for items weighted by 1 that I enumerated earlier? Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment on item 2. Oh, sorry. No, that's the next one. So you'll have an opportunity there. All right, I don't have to reverse gavel, so that's good. I don't get to use the gavel very often, so. All right, and I'll bring it back to the board. I did want to make one point on this list is I know one of the speakers referred to the stipends. I just wanted to point out that those stipends, as we're directing staff, those are one time, so that would only apply to the 26-27 school year, and the request is to negotiate with our labor partners, and on the assumption that would be a snapback. So I just want to be clear to those in the audience. All right, bring it back to the board. Any questions or discussion? I know we spent hours and hours the last meeting. Okay, go ahead, Trustee Karen.
Are we going to have a presentation, or because I'm just going to talk about something on the slide?
That's next. We're going to vote on what we discussed, what we put as item category 1.
All right, is it about the resolution, or is it about the next agenda item?
I think it's about the resolution. It's about this line item right here. There's something on it.
Okay, if it's related to an item that we're going to vote on, you can make a public comment. That's fine.
So on the slide that we're going to see, on slide number 13, it talks about these reductions that we're making. Half of them are negotiated items, and I just want to bring it to the board that's very, very concerning to me, and that in light of high school programs and middle school programs increasing the staffing. So for me, again, I was on the negotiating team for 15 years, and it was extremely difficult. It was very difficult. They put in long hours. They work really hard. And I value the relationship that we have with our labor partners. And so these cuts that are on here right now kind of put me over the edge. And I'm afraid I don't want to make a mistake with our labor partners. I don't want to make a mistake as a board. And so for me, I am not really comfortable having the middle school programs and the high school programs because it puts us over the edge with 50%. And so we have $5 million, it looks like, that's negotiated. And if they say no, we've only made $5 million worth of cuts. So that's my concern, and I wanted to bring it back to the board to discuss that a little bit. Anyway.
Okay, that's fine. I have a response for you, but I want to hold it. Anyone want to respond to that? All right. So my personal response is, and we discussed this last time, and what, like you said, we have a presentation in the next section, and if any of one's listening online or in the room, there will be a presentation in the next item that kind of says, assuming everything that we vote on tonight was there, this is what it looks like, right, from a budget reduction perspective against the resolution that we made previously to be fiscally responsible, right? The discussion that we had last time was we recognize that, as you pointed out, half of the items on the total list with the resolution we made last time plus tonight's resolution, if this second resolution was approved, is about 11 million, and the fact that half of those are negotiable items, right? And what was discussed and I thought agreed at the board level, and of course we haven't voted on it, so we have a right to comment on it, was to give our negotiating committee the opportunity to meet with our labor partners and have some sufficient items on the list so they can have meaningful, earnest, and what's the word I'm looking for? Have those negotiations, and with our direction, if we reduce that, we're basically saying you have to agree to these other items, otherwise we will be fiscally in the red. So the idea of paring down the list to limit the options that our negotiating committee has when bargaining in good faith, that was the word I was looking for, puts them at a disadvantage. And so that's why I thought we as a board had agreed to this sort of combined list. So go ahead, Trustee Jones, you had a comment?
So I was on the losing end of some of the items that are on this list, but I was okay with that because it's that understanding that it's that give and take that we have done throughout this agreement. To quote APT from earlier, the focus is on the students today. And if we don't do the items that we have on this list, then we are going to have to go back and cut more of these positions that will be impacting the students today. So for me, I would be more comfortable keeping the items on this list to give APT the option, because they could say no, they can say yes, they can meet somewhere in the middle. That's what bargaining is. But it's better to have the option in the discussion than to not have it at all and have to remove even more of these positions that would directly hit the class immediately as opposed to potentially delayed.
Okay, Trustee McCaughey.
So first and foremost, thank you, Trustee Carrion. I appreciate bringing the concern up to us as a board and having the opportunity for us to have a conversation. I've said before, and I'll say it again, sometimes we're not given that opportunity to have the conversation and have the freedom to say yay or nay. It's that nuanced process. So thank you. That said, I see it to kind of tag on to what Trustee Jones has stated, is that I see this as a trust process. And I'll be the first one to speak. I'm a process-oriented person. So by us putting this on the consideration, it gives that opportunity for our district team to collaborate with our labor union partners to have the conversations. And I do like how it's presented. It's going from 26 to 27 or 27 to 28. So there's some wiggle room. So it's going to give that opportunity to have this process roll out. Now, that said, for those who are not aware, there is that finance committee that meets quarterly, I believe. And so when Ahmad talks about the qualification process of how we work with the Alameda County and how they rate our 3-year plan, and the conversation about us having, even from public comment tonight, about having a strategic long-term plan, it's not looking good for us right now as a district if we're not thinking about all the different options, because there is a potential situation where we're going to be in the red by the rating from the county when we look 3 years out. And that, for me, is worrisome. So my point is, there's not to say that we can't rescind some of the portions of the resolutions that we're passing now, but if we don't put it forward, we're not even giving them the opportunity to have the conversation.
I guess my concern is that when we had this conversation last week, I wanted to put the specialist on the list, and it was a 4-1. What? And so I'm saying, so what I'm saying is that you're saying that we want to give them opportunity to bargain and negotiate, but you were not willing to give that chunk. And I think that there could have been made progress with them. But so
we as a board can make a choice, and we can bring certain items back on the table to have a conversation. So if, the way I see it, if there's a majority of the board that wants to bring that back as a conversation, there's no saying that we can't do that. So, to your point, if you feel strong enough to say, fellow trustees, I want to bring back and have a conversation about specialists, then we can talk about it.
And again, I want to make clear that I'm not saying that I don't value specialists. I'm just saying that that's not a negotiated item, and that I'm afraid that we're going to get to a point and we're not going to make enough cuts. And if we had at least put this on the table, we would have the option. I just don't want to be in a position next year of having to make more cuts because we weren't fiscally responsible this year. I want to give our negotiating team as much wiggle room, as you said, as possible.
So, yeah, I mean, again, we're sort of getting ahead of the presentation. We've done our homework, so we've looked at the presentation. It's a public presentation, by the way. So if you want, you can look at item 3. But yeah, no, absolutely. There's no doubt that half the items of this 11 million are items that require negotiation. And it is entirely possible that as a board, we will have to reconvene a special meeting in January and go through the items that are right now in the 3 column if those negotiations fail. But I don't want to presuppose those negotiations will fail and start putting on positions that the community and the board have said in an ideal scenario we need to keep these positions to protect our most vulnerable students and to keep the uniqueness that makes Pleasant PUSD, right? So I agree with both points of view. Like I'm espousing the point of view we need to have a larger list so that the negotiating committee has flexibility. You're making the same argument, except you're saying include some of the specialist positions so they have maximum flexibility. I respect that. And I made the comment at the last meeting when we were kind of talking about a parcel tax, which is not on tonight's agenda, but one of the speakers referenced this. I feel that eliminating the positions and then going to a parcel tax saying you have to agree to this and we'll bring those back is a harder community conversation than listening to the community, listening to the parents, listening to as to what they want to protect most, and then create a parcel tax to protect those without threatening, like eliminating and then saying to, I personally think that's a harder conversation, but I can see both sides of it. So
just to tag on what President Brown is saying, I'm really going to ask we put aside the parcel tax conversation. I think that it sends the wrong message if we're talking about budget cuts and then in the same conversation talk about parcel tax. Right now, our job is to deal with the budget cuts. So I think procedurally, the way we can do this is either we continue with the resolution vote, and then a second part of our agenda tonight is to talk about other items. And it's not to say you can't re-add something on the 3s bucket. We can bring it back in the next agenda item conversation. So that's
Vice President,
what I would probably recommend.
Vice President McCoskey is absolutely right. The only reason I mentioned the word parcel tax, just to be clear, is because we need people in the community to understand that we recognize that we have to do budget cuts for this cycle, and we also need to be thinking longer term, right, to the point of some of the speakers.
Right.
So that's the last I'll say on that. But procedurally, I'd be looking for a motion and a second or a counter motion at this time.
Is it possible to take the negotiated items out and make 2 different motions, or no? Because
Yes, trustee, as board, we have the authority, so you can amend the resolution, or we can vote as is, and then because you really want to talk about another item on the agenda in combination, because you're talking about specialists. So what I'm saying,
I agree with you, yes.
I am saying, if you feel comfortable, I can make a motion to say, let's approve the current resolution as stands, and then we can talk about the other item in the next agenda.
Okay, can I clarify something procedurally? So two points I want to make. One is we already have negotiable items in what we already approved at the last meeting, right? So This is adding to that. So when you say, can I separate out you're talking about the staffing allocation and the stipends, right? Lanita, as our policy.
That's okay.
I already have a
agree with
motion on the
Trustee
table.
Makashi.
I have a
Well,
motion.
no, I just want to make sure that if we create two motions, that's permissible. Okay, all right. So if we want to do that, we can, but you would need a
We
first and
have-
a second.
I already have a motion on the table.
I will second.
Thank you. So let's vote, and if it doesn't pass, then we can redo another motion.
Okay, can you restate the motion just for clarity?
Yes. To reiterate, I am proposing to accept the current resolution as stands for the 21.50 for $3,526,975. Second.
Okay. That's a roll call vote. Trustee Carrion.
We can go different order. Aye.
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 And I for myself.
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Okay. So to be clear, we're closing item 2 and we're moving on to item 3. Now we will move into that staff presentation that we teased in the last discussion.
Thank you, President Brown.
Go ahead, Maurice.
Yeah, I'm looking to, okay, great. So I've repeated this every time, numerous meetings. We recognize that the work that you're not about to embark on, that you have embarked upon, is very challenging because it impacts really our most cherished resources, the employees of PUSD, and we want to acknowledge that everyone in the organization is very much considered a valued member. So as we move forward, like I've said in the past, let's do so like our students are watching, and let's demonstrate the kind of civility and acts of democracy that we want to behold for them. Also, I would just like to take a minute to say words of appreciation and gratitude. Gratitude for, first and foremost, the trustees. You've worked with numerous board meetings on that, and you've taken your role very seriously and with conscientiousness, and I thank you for that on behalf of everyone. Also, staff, you've worked nights, weekends, you have day jobs, you've put a lot of things together, and you've taken a lot of bows and arrows, and I want to commend you for your courage and your stick-to-itiveness. And finally, I want to thank our parents, our public, for their public speaking, for people watching, and everybody taking such great interest in our students. Thank you. Ahmad? So tonight's agenda is very much like the past. I'm going to go through these quickly, review the process to date and what we're going to do going forward. Again, take a look at the Alameda County Office of Education's conditions for approving the 25-26 budget, and move to the review of the updated reduction list. Then we'll take public comment and board finalize consensus with the rating exercise and board action. Ahmad? So you can see here we are on our 7th. This was added this week, our 7th special meeting, and we kept the placeholder for next Thursday, December 4th, if needed. Ahmad? So this is, I'm not going to read this, this basically says the conditions from the county are that we actually have to look at $8.1 million, 8.2 rounded up, for the 26-27 year, and also an additional rounding up to $800,000 for the following year, 2027. We made this commitment, the board did, I should say, in a resolution in September, and at the bottom of the slide you can link to that full resolution. Ahmad? And this is to be reviewed again. At the low end here you see a projected COLA of 3.02%. The low end is $10 million. An enrollment of 12,672 is stable. The state economy is stable. assumes also no compensation increase and $1 million for a variance or potentially inflation. On the maximum reductions, and this is worth repeating, this could assume that there's a 1% decrease in COLA, and Ahmad will be talking about, we really won't know what this is for sure until the January governor's budget, but indications show that COLA is going to be at least a 1% decrease. Also, the 12,672 students for enrollment next year assumes that that will stay stable. However, if we continue to decline, for every 100 students, we lose $1.2 million in LCFF money. And of course, this doesn't account for the state going south and regarding the economy, as well as any compensation increase. This 1% of compensation increase across the board is $1.7 million. Ahmad?
I'll take this slide. So on this one here, we wanted to clearly show the different components of it, and I want to really emphasize that the $8.2 million and the $800,000 that were identified were a snapshot in time based on our 45-day budget. We're in the process of updating our budget, and things do change. There are continued cost pressures. And so considering those factors and the factors of declining enrollment and COLA, we placed in this budget reduction target placeholders for variables. The variables may differ at the end, but we believe that these variables are critical as we plan those forward. And so you see a variable for other unknown factors and rising cost, for the LCFF funding due to declining enrollment, and the potential of a lower COLA than what was stated to us by the state at a 3.02. Early indications from the state and other economists is that that will be lower. It could be as low as 1.27, and it could be as high as 2.53. We will know more in January when the governor comes out with his initial budget. We have not placed additional placeholders for other factors at this moment. And so those are really important. You look at the out years, there are no other placeholders for that. We've only indicated those minimums reductions that were part of our 45-day budget, and you can see what the totals are for the 3-year total. Maurice, you want to take the next slide?
Yes, got it. So this one is basically saying that like Ahmad was just talking about, that final reductions may vary due to several factors. And the board, though, at the meantime, needs to identify enough reductions to cover the current known factors and variances as identified. And of course, the most important bullet here is that reductions can be scaled back up until and beyond May 15th if the picture in the economy and our tracking in first interim and second interim improve.
Great. Well, the other thing that I wanted to note is these reductions that we've assumed here are to bring us to a balanced budget. And so that means that revenues and expenditures match each other, and that's kind of like our goal right now, is to get to that balanced budget.
Okay. So next we're going to look at the summary of multi-year reductions. I'll start with staffing information, and then Ahmed will cover the financial and fiscal information. So to begin with, this is a demonstration of the reductions that we've made, that have been made over the past 3 years. So beginning with the reductions made for 24-25, 25-26, And then 26, 27, of course, are estimated reductions because you're still engaged in that process. But the data here includes the items that the board had weighted as ones, both on November 6th as well as November 13th. The resolution that you just passed would include those numbers to give a sense of the total number of reductions, what percentage is comprised of each unit classification. So of the reductions made for 3 years, certificated comprised 52% of the reductions, classified 27%, and management 20.4%. To the right are the reductions as a proportion of that unit's total FTE. So of the certificated FTE, of their total FTE, 9.5% reductions have occurred. For classified, of their total FTE, 8.3%, and for management, of the total FTE, it's 34.5%. So these are the 3-year reductions that have been made for the benefit of the crowd and everyone else to follow along with the work that's already been done. The next slide shows the change prior to current. So prior to reductions that were made in 24-25, the 23-24 breakdown of staffing by the various classifications is shown on the left. So certificated staff used to make up 58.3% in 23-24, classified was 35.4%, and management was 6.3%, including all of the reductions over the 3 years, also including the one items rated 1. We have now a certificated at 59.7%, classified at 35.8%, and management at 4.5%. And with that, Ahmed will cover some financial data.
Great, thank you. So on the financial side, what you see is total salaries expended by classification between the certificate, classified, and management. This is just salaries only. No benefits and statutories included. And so you can see, and this is all cost, it will include everything from, positioned and non-positioned, and restricted and unrestricted. And you can see over this period of time that our certificate salaries between 23 and 24, that was the year that we implemented some additional significant compensation. So you see that all the categories increased, and then we started with the reductions in 24-25, moving into 25-26 with further reductions, and you can see in actual dollars how each by classification that has impacted it. So there have been reductions in certain areas, and then there have been adds in other areas as well. And so you can see the net result of the actions we've taken. The prior years are all actuals. 25-26 is based on the adopted budget numbers. This next slide summarizes the reductions that we indicated, the 45-day budget based on that. So that's for 26, 27 and 27, 28, and the total, which is about $9 million. The minimum target reductions are based on those variables that we have added to the reduction to be able to meet what we believe is the minimum and being able to remain a balanced budget. And then the third bullet are the items that were identified and now approved by the board to be reduced. And of those total of 11,036,000, about half of them require negotiation. Many of the others will require other types of negotiations in terms of impacts and effects. Marta, do you want to add anything else to that one?
The only thing I would clarify is, if it's indicated as formally negotiable, that's because there's contract language associated with it. But many of the other reductions will require impacts and effects conversations with our labor partners.
Thank you. Thank you, Namora and Ahmad. Now next, we'll continue staff reviewing the current reduction list, then public comment, and then the board works on the rating exercise, and then potentially moving to action. So with that, President Brown, I hand it over to you. And Marta, you're going to continue with presentation with the launching of the reduction options. So we'll go through the purple lines, and I'll turn it over to staff to go over those.
Thank you, Dr. Geisels. I'll take the first item. So at the last board meeting, the board directed the superintendent and us to relook at the reading intervention specialists. That would be line J3. And so Director of Elementary Schrag and myself, we looked at the staffing and the position. And like I said last time, we have an intervention program that really consists of different positions that provide intervention for our elementary students. The RISs are one of those positions that provide that service. But we look at it holistically, and we will show you on the slide deck what we mean by that in a few minutes. Where we landed in terms of identifying a new option for the board is a 3.75 reduction option, and so that'll be from a 7.5 current FTE, and so we landed at 3.75. We looked at, a 25% reduction, 50% reduction, and so on. This would be a 50% reduction from 7.5 to 3.75, and we will show you the breakdown of how we landed there when we get back to the slide deck.
Okay. And the other item added to the list since the last time we met and reviewed it is item O.8, which is, I believe there was a request from board members to look at substitute rates, and we did some comparables with our closest neighbors, and we can reduce sub rates by a small percentage. So that results in a total of roughly 100,000 savings projected. It's an estimate because it depends on usage, but based on prior year usage, that's what we estimate the savings to be.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Continue with the presentation. We'll get through the slides on the risk question, and then I'll bring it back to the board for questions related to the presentation.
All right, thank you. So as I alluded to on the list, the reading intervention specialists are part of a group of staff that provides intervention for our students that we've identified as having the most needs. Obviously, reading intervention specialists provide the service specifically for our literacy needs at all of our elementary schools. This chart breaks down what are the roles, the primary areas of focus, what's the scope of work for the two different positions. In the green column there, you'll see the intervention specialists. Those are our certificated staff who support our program, and I talked a little bit about that last week. The reading intervention specialists are in that blue column there, and you could see they're classified staff. They provide small group instruction, one-on-one, and so forth. Next. So this is a picture of our current staffing for both intervention specialists and reading intervention support specialists. And what we do annually is we look at the test scores of our students in the K-5 schools. The number in the sort of salmon color there, the red salmon color, are the number of students that we've identified as having intensive needs based on the DIBELS, or now we call the M-class data. And you could see some of our schools, we identify more students with intensive needs, and some of our schools less. The percentage aligns with the top number, and you could see, for example, at Valley View with 118 students, that comprises about 27% of the students that we identify as having more intensive reading and literacy needs. With that data, we have currently 10 intervention specialists, and you could see the allocation of the specialists. It's essentially one at each school, but Valley View has 2. And so aligned with our philosophy around providing services where we identify more needs, that's why they have 2.0 specialists, intervention specialists. The asterisk at the bottom there, you can see there is additional funding for the certain staff. So in particular, that when I was just talking about the 2.0 at Valley View, a portion of that FTE is actually funded by our CSACE, which is the Comprehensive Coordinated Early Intervention plan. So there is some additional funding for staff for that particular position. The RISs, the Reading Intervention Support Specialist, the total as we speak is 7.5 FTE, and these staff members support the literacy needs, and you could see the breakdown there. Again, the asterisks identify additional funding sources that certain schools receive to provide more FTE for those services. Then the bottom line is the total number of FTE for the number of staff provided. So that's the current picture. And the following slide, you will see should there be a reduction, and where we landed was a 50% reduction. The original item was a phase out of the total 7.5, so this will be the remaining 3.75, and you can see the allocation there again based on the identified need. Valley View will continue to have of the remaining staff 1.5 FTE, and then the others are 0.75, 0.75, and so forth. And in some schools will not have a RIS. They will continue to have an intervention specialist based on what the board identified as retaining. So those will be the services and so forth for the remaining schools. And I believe that is it.
This next slide, we wanted to kind of put the local control accountability plan perspective into it. The district receives, through that process, those supplemental dollars. The LCAP program, as developed right now, is approximately $5,226,000. The supplemental funding that the district is estimated to receive this year is about $5.1 million. So those additional costs, if they become actualized, would be borne onto the non-supplemental side of the general fund. The program cost will increase year over year due to the majority of the costs are related to staffing. And so we're estimating that if no reductions are made in the LCAP portion of the budget, the cost next year will be around $5.3 million, while the supplemental funding is estimated to be around $5.1 million. So in order to at least maintain the programs and those costs not to impact the remainder of the district's budget, at a minimum, we'd need about the $183,000 of reduction. So we just wanted to kind of bring that to perspective. If there are additional reductions identified by this group through the LCAP process, which is updated annually and brought before the board for approval, the staff through the LCAP process, the committee would look at what funds are available and would allocate them to programs and goals to meet the LCAP. So the funds still need to be expended based on the LCAP goals. We just wanted to bring that to your attention. We're done.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So I'm going to bring it back to the board for questions. So I know we went through a lot. We went through the baseline, the multi-year reduction summary, and the 3-year projection, and so on. And we also discussed the risks, and we also discussed the impact on LCAP. So I'm spelling it out just to keep it tight, which is, do you have any questions regarding staff's presentation or any of these items covered here before I go to public comment? All right. Yeah, you can, so it looks like Trustee Jones had his hand up first, so we'll go with him.
I'm going to start with the sub-pay one. So right now it looks like you're saying it's $20 basically as a reduction. Would it be possible to do 25 and still be competitive in this area?
as in I work in Dublin, and that's $200.
It would be. Livermore is slightly higher, so we were trying to get to a still competitive but comparable rate.
All right, so if 25 would still keep us more or less within that area, because we'd be higher than Dublin, but what would the,
We'd be matching Dublin, below
matching Dublin.
Livermore, and below much of the county.
all right, so I guess I would.
Yeah, Trustee Jones, we discussed this at staff. I think it really depends on what the market plays out. We definitely could lower it another $5, and we'd have to see what our supply and demand is, how well we're covered. But it's definitely feasible. Just know that we'll have to test it out and see how much a lower fee would draw in terms of filling teachers with substitute positions for short term.
Okay, so I think that's a discussion I'd like to have with the board then in a moment, because
Yeah, well, we'll take up that discussion after public comment, but it's a valid question, so thank you.
Yeah, and then my next question is, if you could go back to the changes in risks that we were looking at. My question is, so I'm looking at the changes for when we're looking at Alisal, Donlin, and Fairlands. The difference is only one student, but Alisal ends up losing its risks under this model. So my question is what were you using as because I know I guess I have two questions. One, what in the CSACE plan is assisting Hearst with theirs, and I'm not advocating that they take it away. I'm just curious, like, what in the plan is allowing for that, and then what was how did we decide on the split between Alisal, Donlin, and Fairlands?
Thank you, Trustee Jones. So Hearst and Valley View were identified by the CSACE committee and therefore written in the plan to address their needs. The CSACE, for those of the folks that may not know it, it's a plan to address the disproportionality of students who are found eligible or referred and found eligible for special education. And so we've identified our African American student group and also our Hispanic Latino group. And so we identified those two schools to add FTE through the CSACE plan. Mr. Schrag, you want to talk about Alisal? Oh, I'm sorry.
Clarify that. So even though it says 9%, they have more African Americans. Is that?
It's EL is what I understand, Mr. Schrag.
Yeah, it was just those are the two schools that are identified, to your point, Mr. Vila, also about the schools that we wanted to target in supporting students. So students get identified at those two schools for support, and the risk is one of the things that's written into the plan as part of the way we address it. So,
Mr. Schrag, the breakdown of do you have that off the top of your head, breakdown of our student population, student groups, why we identified Valley View, for example?
Yeah, I believe because they did have a high proportion of students, again, based on the CSACE plan, of disproportionate students referred for special ed, but the students who are struggling, and those are, and again, it's a little bit difficult because technically the CSACE plan is supporting all of our students, but we wanted to find a way to effectively address needs at specific sites. So instead of having things happening at every site and we wanted to concentrate our kind of what's allocated for the CSACE plan at those specific sites.
Thank you for that part, because thank you for that part, because I wanted the public to be aware of like how CSACE works, because it is a weird acronym. Yeah. And then for my second part, the split between Alisal, Donlin, and Fairlands, how did that come about?
Yeah, this is kind of a fluctuating, this is our best projection right now based on if the numbers were to be consistent. Now, sometimes the intensive needs increase or decrease. And again, with this proposed allocation, it was looking at the nature of the risk program is that they're meeting with students in multiple days. So there's a little bit of a challenge in having RISs share sites, for example, if they're meeting with students for multiple days at a site to then go to another site. So in a perfect world, we would have some of those sites that have equal amounts have RISs that maybe go to two different sites. But given that we're just looking at that needs-based allocation, and we know that there's some sites that have less and some sites that have more. So this would be a kind of based on the data in the coming year, this may fluctuate based on the needs. So if we have a higher amount of intensive students, it may move. So this is just based on the numbers that happened this year. I do want to also make sure there's a point that these are the most intensive students. We still have strategic students that are also below grade level, and those are students that are not addressed in this plan. This is, again, the students that are the most kind of at risk or at promise. So again, we wanted to make sure that those are the students we focus on first. We also know that we are focusing on our K2 students. What you're looking at here is the K5 intensive students. The vast majority of our students who have intensive needs are those younger grades, but again, this is something that would fluctuate based on the data from our M-class and DIBELS assessment of where those risks would be allocated.
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation.
Sure.
Okay. Other questions? Go ahead.
So without the risk staff, will the intervention specialists be forced to do more direct intervention rather than the systems?
Yeah, so there's a challenge in that. I want to clarify too that the RISs do support our assessments of these students. So when we have our testing days, the RISs are a team with the ISs to do that. Right now, there's about 20 or 10 days of assessment at the beginning of the year, for example, for the DIBELS. Without the RIS team, the IS team will now have to kind of augment and make their testing window bigger, which will limit the amount of time that they have with those students, if that makes sense. So more time testing and less time actually directly with students. So that is a tension that will be put on the literacy program based on the reduction of staffing.
I do want to add too that Alisal has less students than Donlin. That was another factor.
Right.
And just to recall last week when we discussed the equity allocation plan or deployment plan, we would centralize the position. So a lot of this could be flexible in terms of where individual FTE are assigned. That's also true for the CSACE, just to put that out there. Should the numbers change in any of our schools, we have the ability to move the FTE to the identified schools.
Okay. Other questions? Either on this or any other topic discussed in the slides?
No, but that was my question, that Trustee Jones. I mean, there's only one student difference between Alisal and Donlin, and they don't get a person. So I just didn't like that.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask an obvious question. So you mentioned that obviously intensive needs, you mentioned the younger grades factor into this, but I don't see it in the table in any way. So in what ways did you take the younger grades into account when coming up with the recommendations?
Again, we're looking at those things with the highest leverage as far as, and we know that there's strong data in terms of the results of our intervention program, especially when we're addressing K1-2 students into this program. There, we see measurable growth with our M-class data throughout the year. Mm-hmm. So we would need to have a plan with, involving classroom teachers to supporting intensive needs students at the upper grades, and we work on that with the sites. But the idea is that the most, I think we've talked about it before, the most return on this is to get students up to grade level by second grade with their literacy needs. That doesn't mean we are forsaking the needs of other students, but the bulk of students who need this are K1-2, and we want to make sure that we have this program that is shown with data outcomes that are positive in terms of reducing the number of intensive kids and increasing the number of kids who are at or above grade level.
Okay, understood. Go ahead, Trustee McCaughey.
I have a completely different question. Oh my God, sorry. I don't know what happened. Apologize. My question is completely different. It is on job descriptions. How are job descriptions created? So for example, the intervention specialist, is that something that is worked with labor partners, or is it done universal at the district level, or how is that done?
Non-management job descriptions, so classified and certificated job descriptions, are negotiated with our labor partners.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Okay. One more question. Trustee Carrion.
So we've been implementing UFly, and so do we have any data yet to suggest that that is making good progress and we may see a reduction in these numbers?
I certainly hope so, and I just we need to do some more longitudinal kind of looking into it. We know that UFly, when it's done with with fidelity and integrity, and we've seen a lot of teachers doing that there's great results for that. I don't have the data to support in terms of the last 2 or 3 years because I think it's just now been fully implemented, but I'd love to find that out. But the literacy needs are still there, so I want to be really clear that UFLA is not somehow, fix this, but it certainly helps, yeah.
All right, Trustee Jones?
Sorry, I just had one last question because related to Valley View, just because it's unique in its design. Does dual immersion play into these numbers as well in any way, and if so, how?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of great work done by the Valley View staff and Principal Withers on making sure that we're understanding when students struggle with literacy, whether that's a literacy issue or that's a language issue. So, for example, our scores for some of these things have been modified to make sure that we're not kind of tagging kids as struggling readers when it could be just a language acquisition. And I can't give in all the details, but that's the idea, is that we're making sure that students who struggle sometimes are just developing their language, so we want to make sure that we're kind of addressing their language needs as well as, to make sure. So that's a continuing conversation and strong work that they're doing, the staff's doing to address that.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Okay, so not seeing any other questions on the board, I'm going to open up public comment on item 3. And we'll start with Mr. Dutra again, followed by Thomas Choi.
Thank you, Steve Dutra. I don't have prepared comments on this topic, but I'll go off the cuff here. Reading is the base fundamental for all education. You can't do science, you can't do math, social studies, history, can't read what's on this board, can't understand it without reading. The specialists keep our kids on grade level. We reduce the staffing level. That's going to stretch them. It's going to reduce the time that they have with our students. That's going to impact the students, obviously, confidence levels, their abilities to stay on level. It's also going to impact the classroom. It's going to push teachers harder. I don't see how this is an option for us to cut. It's not a great deal. Reading is too important of a fundamental resource for kids. So I would ask the board to pass on this option. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Stephen. Thomas?
Good evening, Board President Brown, Dr. Hagelin, and trustees. For the record, my name is Thomas Choi. I'm a parent of a kindergartner at Hearst Elementary. I'm also a California attorney. I'm speaking tonight regarding RIST, item J3, and the proposal to phase that out, as well as item I.2, the reduction of the elementary intervention specialists. Tonight, I was genuinely heartened to hear several of you speak earlier tonight about the importance of protecting our most vulnerable student base. I share that value completely. I also understand the difficult reality you guys are navigating. As a member of this community, I want to offer my time, my legal background to help the board and staff to find savings that can be both fiscally sound and compliant. I want to be a partner in solving this budget puzzle with you. However, I am compelled to share my professional concern that the current proposal may inadvertently conflict the very protections you voiced tonight, and significantly, it might also conflict with California state law. I urge you to reconsider these cuts based upon the 3 points that I'm going to be presenting to you today. Number one, the required action that's within the district's LCAP, the Local Control and Accountability Plan. Because our students with disabilities have been identified for differentiated assistance, the school board is legally required to implement specific remedies. If you look at page 194 of the LCAP, you will see that students with disabilities have a goal 2 and action 2.1, which explicitly mandates elementary intervention specialists. My concern is that by cutting elementary intervention specialists, we will be removing the primary mechanism that was assigned to support the very students that we are trying to protect. Number two, the local impact at our elementary schools. Regarding the operational reality, if we approve or if you approve the reduction of the reading intervention support specialists, the impact at Hearst Elementary will be immediate. I spoke with the RISs, and currently our intervention team can serve 15 kindergarten students per cycle. Under this new proposal, that capacity drops to a maximum of 5. That's a 66% reduction in access. This means that at Hearst alone, 2/3 of the identified students who currently are getting access and need reading access will be turned away. When we look at the slide that you just presented, slide 18 of your presentation, I'm concerned that it shows support dropping to 0 at other schools. I'm worried that this creates an unintended equity violation that could expose the district to liability regarding the disproportional impact. Finally, regarding slide 20 of your budget presentation, it admits that the LCAP deficit, the amount needed to balance the LCAP budget, is $183,000. Yet your proposal with respect to cutting these two programs, the RIS and the elementary intervention specialists, will cut over $960,000. So as a result, you are proposing to cut 5 times more than what is necessary to balance the LCAP budget. This creates a massive LCAP surplus, which suggests that the intent is it may be used to use this money to backfill general fund obligations. Under Education Code 42238.07, this presents a serious risk of supplanting, which is a direct violation of state funding laws. In conclusion, I believe there's a way to balance this budget without sacrificing our required equity and state statutes. Please accept my offer to help navigate, but for tonight, if you do a vote, I urge you to vote no on cutting the reading intervention support specialists, item J.3, and elementary intervention specialists, item I.2. Thank you for the extra time.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Choi. Christina? If there's anyone else that wants to speak on this item, please come up to Lenita.
So here's one of the things I don't understand is how are we talking about what we should cut without really understanding where the need is? And so that's why I keep coming up and talking about the data. Obviously, as I've already said so many times, our vulnerable students are not doing well. They continue to do even worse in 25 compared to 24. I've heard about the RIS, the intervention specialists. Several of them have reached out to me. We've got the social workers, we've got the parent liaisons, and I guess my question is, who's taking point? Is there someone that's taking responsibility for these students and these vulnerable populations? And I guess I'm also curious why no one in the board, no one at the school district is talking about anything that's not positive. Because the negative data is really what should be informing the choices that you're making tonight, not the rah-rah, Pleasanton's so great. That's not what we're talking about right now. So I guess I just want to make sure, I'm just surprised that in light of the data, we're even thinking about cutting anything that relates to support for vulnerable students. That just seems bonkers to me. If these students were doing great and there was no need, then absolutely cut it. But that's not the case looking at the data. So I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know what the right, actually I have a lot of right answers, but I just think about the data. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Christina. All right, any other public speakers tonight? Going once, going twice. All right, closing public comment on item 3 and bringing it back to the board for discussion. So let's start with, I think, the easier of the two topics regarding the substitute rate. Should we start there? I'll turn it over to whoever wants to speak first. First to the mic. Go ahead.
Sorry, again, I sub in both Dublin and San Ramon, $200. I think $200 is reasonable, and I'd like to move it up to $25.
Okay. Trustee Jones, do you concur?
Yeah, I think I'd be pretty okay with that. I mean, I brought it up, but it's just our students are behavioral-wise pretty phenomenal. I know people that sub in both this district and other districts, and like people like to be substitute teachers here for a reason.
Go ahead.
Definitely go down to 200.
So my question would be, what does that make the number change to? Is it 120,000?
It would likely be another 25%, so approximately 125,000 total.
Okay. So I would concur. I think I do hear the district stating that I think we'll need to see trial and error, but it seems like it would not be the top tier for competitiveness for subs, but it would be middle to average. So I think considering the situation that we're in, I think it's a good idea. So thank you for bringing that up, Trustee Jones. And thank you, Trustee Carrion, for initially recommending it, and thank you, staff, for adding it.
All right. Yes, thank you, everyone, for bringing this item, because this is something that's actionable. It doesn't directly impact our staff. One quick question that I do have, though, based on any vacancies that we have, has that been taken into account in coming up with this estimate, or are you just looking at the total hours from last year to come up with the estimate of 100, now 120?
We actually looked at data for 4 years to determine the usage, so half-day subs, full-day subs, to project out what the usage would be in a future year.
And did
so
you
based on the
scale
average.
that according to the total FTE in our schools?
Yes, we took that into account, because if we just look at dollar values, it's not scaled. The cost for subs, because there was more staff, but also sub rates until 2 years ago were still at the pandemic level, so the cost is much higher. So the estimate that we're giving you is based on an average scaled down.
Okay. All right. So, Lenita, if we were to take this as an action item that's permissible, and we can do it as a separate from the risk discussion, correct? Okay. So for clarity, let's just do it as a separate action. So I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the sub-rate
Reduction by
reduction by
$25.
$25. Thank you.
Second.
Okay. First and seconded. Roll call vote.
Aye.
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 An aye for myself, so that passes. That was items, I think, 0.8, if I'm not mistaken. All right, so bring it back to the board for discussion around the risks and the impact on LCAP. So discussion, questions, clarifications, opinions, comments? Go ahead, Trustee Carrion.
So again, it was my experience as an elementary teacher that both the intervention and the risk teachers were extremely valuable, and our data is suggesting that we still need a lot of support in this area, so I am not in favor of any reduction in this area.
Okay. Trustee Jones?
For me, we've basically, with what we just did with the sub pay, hit our 11.2 million, or just about close to it. And so, again, I was a student with dyslexia that was undiagnosed. I struggled with that, especially in elementary school. I see the value in this position. So for me, I would prefer that we do not cut this position.
Proportional or at all? Just so we're clear.
I would say at all, especially with how it, and even with equity, how it lines up, it would just be a problem.
Okay. Trustee Walker?
Yes, I vacillated back and forth with this one. This was a hard one, but I worry about the number of students served dropping dramatically. I mean, at some schools aren't even going to have a risk, and I worry about small group instruction. So I have done a complete 180. I am not in favor of cutting them.
Okay. I mean, the purpose of having public meetings and discussing is, I always say the best politician is an informed politician that is willing to listen to public comment and revise. So you're entitled to change. Trustee Makashi?
I have a question for staff again. So
if there was a request to revisit the positions for the intervention specialists and the risks collectively, because they work together hand in hand. I know one's classified and the other one's certificated, but what would that look like? What would that process be if that was something that would be requested by the ward? And the reason why I ask that is because based upon the information that I've received, I feel wholeheartedly there needs to be an overhaul, a relook at how to maximize the support of how these positions are working together. So that would be my question.
Is your question, Trustee McCaughey, the HR component of this, or the programmatic component? Staffing?
I mean it like, clearly there's been public comment talking about the data that supports the need to support our struggling readers. It's something I'm very passionate about. I have a daughter that has yet to become she was a struggling reader and continues to be a struggling reader, in my opinion. And so my question is, how can we take a look at how the programmatically and HR wise, but I mean, I understand that the actual job descriptions has to be negotiated. So my question is, would that have to be something that would wait for another year to have it brought to the table, or could that be language that could be incorporated in current negotiations? I don't know. I'm asking the question.
Yeah, I mean, job descriptions can be negotiated at any time. So if there's a programmatic shift or a desire to move duties or reorganize the program, then HR would do the work with our in this case, both labor unions, to negotiate those job description changes.
Okay, so I guess the reason why I asked that is because I am torn on this. I do feel that there needs to be a look at how to support these positions, and the model that currently has been told about, in particular for the risks, hitting a greater span of students that the current intervention specialists can't hit because of what their role is and what they do. There is a flaw in the system that we have right now. And so my point is that I would be open to potentially adjusting the risk position, understanding that what was presented tonight is just a moment in time, an example of what the risk positions would be disseminated out at. But bigger picture, the issue is that we need to figure out how we're going to support our students. And so if it's the board desire that we currently preserve the risk positions altogether, but then my bigger ask is that we need to revisit those positions so that they're more efficient, more effective, and making sure we're hitting all our students. So that would be my point.
I would support that.
Yeah, Maurice here. So that's a great question, and I think it's a programmatic one, and it's how we align our expenditures with our goals to our most vulnerable students. And I think this whole, for me, taking a deeper look at how we perform intervention needs to be looked at, and that's not necessarily moving towards reduction. We always have the flexibility to look at ways to deliver services to our students, again, who are of the most need. We have LCAP money, and this is something that I want to work with Mr. De Lazo with, and look to see how best we can spend our money to meet the students with the highest needs. So Ed, do you want to piggyback on that? That's not to say anything preemptively. It just gives us a good reason to follow up on not just what Vice President McCaughey says, but our greatest aim is in equity and making sure we float all boats.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Geisels. Getting back to the question from Vice President McCaughey, It could be that we have the language that is sufficient in the job description. It's really, as Dr. Geisel said, more of a program adjustment that we can take a look at, how do we serve, again, those most intensive needs. And public comment came up about the current data that we have from the last test scores, so we would dig deeper there and look at who are the students, again, with the most needs. It doesn't matter by school, where it's really about allocating the investments of resources, and that's money and people, to provide the service where we identify them being where the biggest need is identified. So it could be a job description question. I would venture the guess that the job description is probably pretty good in terms of what it says in providing the service, more of a programmatic thing. However, having said that, we will definitely look at the job description and see how we can really target the services, the resources to our most needy of kids.
Okay, thank you. So just for those following along, we did update the spreadsheet 0.8 as mentioned. We've created a quote, a one column for 1120. That was tonight. That was both agreement as well as action. And so we did that. I hear clearly from my fellow board members that everyone, the consensus waiting on the risk at this time is a 3. So for clarity, I'm going to move that to a 3 in the spreadsheet, so that we have nothing in the 2. So we've got the 3 items, the 3 action items that are now voted on and accepted by the board. All the other remaining items in the tracking spreadsheet are now in bucket 3. My summary of the risks, in terms of my personal opinion, if anyone cares to hear it, is that there are other items in the 3 column that I would consider scaling before I were to eliminate the risks, just because the risks do more than just the most vulnerable. They also assist the overall classroom and environment and the learning environment for all of the learners in the classroom. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Now, before I close out the meeting, I want to be very clear from my opinion. Sorry, go ahead.
So since we also were doing the presentation, we're doing this list, I think I would like it if, I'm obviously not December because that would be a nightmare, but maybe after we figure things out where we're at in January, I think it would be good for us to do a workshop on budget revenue gain and looking and invite, for example, inviting the chamber, inviting our labor partners, inviting the different groups that we have to have that sit-down discussion of what are ways that we could potentially add in revenue into the district, so that we're having both of these conversations kind of around the same time.
Yeah, where I was going with the discussion was to say that I think as a board we need to commit to regrouping in January after we've given time for our labor negotiations, and we can include updates on the revenue. I think at that time we need updates on the expected COLA. From what I understand, the 3.02 at this point is ambitious, and we expect it to be more like 2.53 at the best. And so I think we need to pre-schedule an update on COLA and any other our enrollment numbers, well, not enrollment, but our ADA numbers, and any other factors on the cost side, as well as any upside from a revenue perspective. Maybe at that time we've got a possible contract on subleasing the district office or whatever. So I guess my question to staff and Maurice in Zoomland is that agreeable for us to pre-plan or pre-schedule? Do we want to include it as part of a regular meeting or bring it as a special board meeting?
So Maurice here. Thank you, President Brown and Trustee Jones. Definitely. We have to work on the revenue side. We could bring that in, and we can also give an update based on the fiscal situation. We do have a first interim in December, And my loose recommendation is that we, and it's not loose in the sense because we can definitely put down a date very soon for January, that we have a special meeting and solely work on those items.
Yeah, I mean, my point is we might still need to discuss these threes depending on the outcome of those discussions. Not that I want to create churn in our community and our staffing circles, but from a realistic perspective, we may need to discuss those in item 3. I think it's inappropriate to discuss that tonight, but at some point we might need to. So I just want to make sure that we're scheduling that, and we're planning for both upside and downside. So, Trustee McCaughey. Oh, go.
No, I'm just for clarity here, and then please go forward, Vice President McCaughey. So it would be for update on revenues, workshop format, as well as update on finance, as well as a check-in regarding the progress of negotiation for the impacts of the reduction.
Correct.
So that those three, and we can put placeholders soon for the January meeting or meetings, special and regular.
Right, and I'm deliberately not stating a date because obviously you need to set negotiation dates with and so on. So I'm going to leave that up to staff to figure out. So with that said, Trustee McCaughey, you've been very patient, so go ahead.
So I'm a process person, and I talked to we talked as a board earlier procedurally for Trustee Carrion, had an ask to bring up as a discussion for tonight. So I think it's very important that we all have a voice and we all have a comment to state, and so I'm going to bring it back to the board, but in particular for Trustee Carrion, and keeping in mind what President Brown just said. Do you want to consider a conversation about what you brought up earlier about the specialists now, or are you okay with President Brown's recommendation to table that and talk a little bit later? So I'm just saying that because we talked to you, in general, we talked as a board to say, okay, we're going to go through the resolution and come back. So I want to honor this process and just bring it back. I completely hear what Trustee Brown is saying, but I also feel like from a standpoint of not this roller coaster effect. So in general, I'm just going to state that I think it's important that we have these conversations. We don't go rush through the process. So I just wanted to present that back.
No, that's great. Thank you for doing that. Trustee Karen?
Procedurally process
No,
oriented.
it's absolutely correct point of order, and I appreciate it. So, Trustee Carrion?
No, I just would like to have a conversation with the board about that option, only because I don't want to overwhelm the negotiation process either. I don't want to add so many things that they just can't possibly get done. But I wanted to discuss, if we are talking about sections at the middle school and the high school, to me, I think sections are at the elementary as well when we talk about specialists. They are extra teachers, and that's what we're talking about. So I think I heard you guys all loudly and clearly last time. You were all against having the specialist on there, and I'm not saying that I want the specialist on there. I'm thinking about, is there any other thing on here that includes a great number of jobs, or is this the only other option?
So what I was saying was that I don't like to pit specialists against each other, and I've heard loud and clear from the community to not touch elementary music in particular because it's a significant bridge to the secondary level. I don't know enough about the programs on if it can be a particular cut in sections for music at the secondary level, and I'm not trying to target, but I guess my point is that I do think there might need to be further discussion, maybe further information, so maybe the staff can come back and give us more information. I don't know. I also would argue that I don't know programmatically if it makes sense, if there is going to be, if we have that conversation back on science. I know it seemed to be more unilaterally decided that it should be 4th and 5th, but I'm just saying that there's a bigger conversation. I hear the point about just, allowing certain specialists that can be supported by classroom teachers, but I also am torn because I've had that specialized training as an art specialist, and I, for one, was saying, okay, well, the way I would support art in the classroom is very different than a classroom teacher. So there is value to the specialists. So I'm thinking maybe we table that and to the conversation that's already alluded to with President Brown's recommendation, and we have a bigger conversation at a following meeting instead of, it seems like there's some more information that the board's asking. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I think I jumped the gun in expressing my preference. You've expressed yours. I'd like to hear from Trustee Jones and Trustee Walker, too, please.
So throughout this process, I have been willing to accept when a vote has not gone my way on some of these other items. Remember, there were things on that bargainable list that I was not comfortable with, but because I was in the losing side of those votes, I accepted and I let it go through. So for me, if we take anything out of this 3-column right now, after going through this entire process, that would feel like a breach of trust for me, because I was willing to do what I did and put my personal feelings aside on these things in order to vote yes on the final outcome of the first couple of columns. So to then have the things that I compromised on, then brought and said we came to an agreement on, now suddenly come back at the last minute to be potentially voted out again after the things that others had wanted have now gone through as ones. I do feel like that would be a very strong breach of trust, and I would have a hard time working with the board in the future on things, because what if this happens? Can I trust that in the future, if I accept the majority outcome, that won't come back to bite me later?
No, I understand that, but my concern is half of these things are negotiable. How do you feel about half of them being negotiated? How?
So for me, it's like I stated earlier, I would, it's also a direct line that came from APT. My focus is we focus on the students that are here today and not just on the hypothetical of tomorrow. So I would rather have a bunch of potential items that are up for bargaining than a bunch of positions now gone. Because, I mean, they may say yes, they may say no, they might meet us in the middle, but I would rather us do this now, and then if we have to, which I hope not, but if we have to, come back in January and do what we have to do.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Walker?
Yeah, I agree with Trustee Jones. I have very strong opinions about this science specialist, and then I've reevaluated and listened to the community about the P specialist. I can't go back. I don't want to go back. It was hard for the staffing allocations, but it's a negotiated item, and I think that we can work within it. And again, I think we have a strong amount of items that can go and be negotiated, and hopefully it will be negotiated well. We're not going to be able to, we won't be back here, but I just can't move past with a specialist. I need to have them remain on there.
Okay. Okay.
Again, I really, really want to make it, I love the specialist. Please don't feel like I want to be fiscally responsible. I don't want us as a board to be making a mistake. That's my concern. I don't want us to say, oh, we're stuck in negotiations and then the teachers go on strike. I don't want that to happen. I'm really afraid. So I am trying to be fiscally responsible. I'm not trying to cut more than I have to, but I respect the board and I understand what you're saying, and I'm just going to hope and pray for the best. That's all I can do, and I'm ready.
Okay. No, thank you. And thank you, Trustee McCaughey, for making sure that everyone's voice is being heard. And I think everyone had some great points there. Just for clarity, it was pointed out to me that we'd added item J.8, which was a scaled version of J.3. So the original J.3 was 7.5 FTE, and the scaled option that was discussed and presented tonight was was a 3.75 FTE. So consistent to the discussion, I just marked that in the spreadsheet as 3. So in case anyone's following along at home and wants to hold me accountable for my spreadsheet skills. All right. With that, there's no other business to discuss tonight. I appreciate everyone's time. I will restate where we ended up because Vice President McCaughey will remind me. We have taken action on 3 buckets of ones. They were originally discussed and agreed on 11/6, 11/13, and then 11/20 tonight. All 3 have been actioned and are therefore our total direction to staff, including negotiating some of those items, is 11.161702 million.
That's what I got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, I will close tonight's meeting at 6:48 p.m. Good night.